call the Joint Legislative Audit Review Committee I-900 Subcommittee Public Hearing meeting to order. It is September 22nd, 2021. And so today the state auditor will be presenting their recent report on the assessing the workplace culture of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. The chair will ask all, or I'm going to ask you all to please mute your phones and your whatever noises you have on your computers, and that will help prevent background noise. I think now we'll have staff go ahead and call the roll.
Yes, thank you. This is a roll call for the September 22nd, 2021 I-900 hearing. Representative Berg.
Present.
Representative Fye. Representative Frame. Representative Gaynor. Senator Hasagawa. Representative Hoff. Senator Lovelett. Senator Mullet.
Here.
Representative Orcutt.
I am here.
Representative Paulette. Senator Rivers. Senator Saldana. Senator Short.
Here.
Representative Stokesbury. Senator Wagner. And Senator Wilson.
I am here.
And I think I saw Representative Gaynor join.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you. We currently have 6 in attendance.
Great. Okay. Well, now we're conducting this meeting today with Zoom video conferencing technology. The meeting is also being streamed live on TVW. Staff from the State Auditor's Office will give us a presentation of their performance audit. JLARC members can let me know during the presentation if you have any questions. Just use the raise your hand feature. After the State Auditor's Office presentation, agency staff will provide comments on the audit report, and members will have an opportunity to ask them questions. We have also invited remote testimony from the public via Zoom, but we do not have anyone that signed up to do that, but we will still accept written testimony as well. Staff supplied information for registering in advance for public testimony via video conference on the JLARC website. And if anyone from the public wishes to provide written testimony, it should be sent to jlarc@leg.wa.gov. And you can see the website, JLARC website, if you want more information. Written testimony will be provided to JLARC members and available to the public on the JLARC website. So today we will invite the Auditor's Office to give us the update on the performance audit. Looks like Emily, is it Simber, and Michelle Fellows will present the report. And there are agency representatives here that will be here to respond to the audit and then answer any questions from the members if you'd like. And that would be Kelly Sustawind, Director, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Amy Windrop, Deputy Director, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Tom McBride, Legislative Director, Department of Fish and Wildlife. So if we want to go ahead and get started, I don't see, maybe turn on their cameras, and we'll get started with Emily and Michelle. Here we go. Did I say your name right, Emily?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good deal. All right, take it away.
I'll share my screen here. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Emily Simber. I'm a performance auditor at the Office of the Washington State Auditor. I'm going to lead over this audit. And with me today is my colleague, Michelle Fellows, who also worked on the project. Before I get into the presentation, I would like to take a moment to thank staff and management at the Department of Fish and Wildlife for all of their cooperation and assistance during the audit. I'd also like to lead with a summary of our key findings. The Department of Fish and Wildlife has taken steps to improve workplace culture at the agency. We also found that at the team level, DFW employees' strong positive views were driven by a sense of meaningful work, camaraderie, and confidence in direct supervisors. Although sexual harassment was the agency's highest profile problem, survey responses indicate that it is not a pervasive issue. Less positive views of the agency's culture were driven by other types of unprofessional behavior, a perceived lack of accountability, and communication challenges. Although the agency has taken steps, more can be done to gain confidence and ensure long-term success of its initiatives. Unfortunately, DFW has garnered significant media attention over the last several years for two high-profile incidents of sexual harassment. One in which a program deputy director was found guilty of rape, another in which an over-sexualized culture at a fish hatchery led to the firing of 4 employees and ultimately cost the state a $2 million contract. These incidents, along with other concerns about general accountability at the department, spurred concern from legislators and other stakeholders about the agency's workplace culture. In this audit, we sought to answer the following questions. What factors at DFW shape its workplace culture? How does the agency's culture affect its performance and ability to achieve its mission? And what steps could leadership take to improve the agency's workplace culture? DFW balances conservation and recreation across the state with a dual mission of protecting fish, wildlife, and ecosystems, while also providing recreational and commercial opportunities. The department has more than 1,800 employees as part of a complex organizational structure that's divided into 6 programs in 6 regions. About a third of employees are based in Olympia. The rest are stationed in over 120 communities across the state, with half of those locations having fewer than 5 employees. In the first performance audit of its kind in the state, we spoke with over 220 DFW employees in every region and program via in-person group and individual interviews, as well as job shadows, in order to get their perspective on the workplace culture at the agency. We also met with management teams in each region, and our interviews included an audit phone line open to all DFW employees. As a result of those conversations and concerns from staff, we conducted an all-agency survey to understand just how widespread these opinions were. The survey had a 45% response rate, with feedback gathered from over 820 of DFW's roughly 1,800 employees. From this work, we found that more than 75% of employees who took the survey had a positive view of the workplace culture on their individual teams. Most employees also felt their work was very meaningful. Nearly 90% of survey respondents said they were passionate about the issues that they work on. We found that these strong positive views were driven by a shared sense of purpose with their colleagues, which led to a spirit of camaraderie, effective teamwork, and mutual support for each other. Most also held a positive view of their direct supervisor as part of their team. Although sexual harassment was DFW's highest profile problem, it was the least noted unprofessional behavior by survey respondents. 2% of all respondents and 4% of female respondents said they had experienced sexual comments or unwanted sexual advances in the last year. These percentages are comparable to averages established by a national survey of workplace sexual harassment. Addressing sexual harassment has been a big area of emphasis for the agency, and these numbers likely reflect steps the agency has taken in recent years to address this type of behavior in the workplace, which we detail later in the presentation. Of course, any instances of sexual harassment do indicate room for improvement, but this was not as significant an issue as stakeholders initially suspected. While over 75% of survey respondents had a positive view of the workplace culture on their individual teams, not quite half said they had positive views of the culture at the agency level. So while many DFW employees enjoy their work, their coworkers, and their immediate supervisor, they also expressed concerns about certain aspects of working at the agency, namely the occurrence of other types of unprofessional behavior, a perceived lack of accountability for that behavior, and communication challenges. The rest of this presentation brings forward their concerns. Although people discussed several other workplace culture concerns with us, we chose to focus on these 3 factors because they were prominent in both the employee survey and discussions with staff, and they were raised by employees in every region and every program. By far, the most prevalent type of unprofessional behavior was aggression in the form of screaming, swearing, being berated in front of colleagues, or being physically threatened or intimidated. This behavior was reportedly experienced by 20% of survey participants and witnessed by 30%. It was also reportedly occurring in every program and region, and many reported experiencing this behavior at least monthly, if not more frequently. The percentages of people at DFW reporting abusive behaviors in the workplace are higher than the national average for workplace bullying, almost double those of national workplace bullying statistics for those who personally experienced the aggression, and more than double for those who witnessed it. It is important to note that the behaviors we describe are self-reported by staff, and we did not investigate particular claims to ascertain the legally defined presence of these types of behaviors, but verifying these claims was not necessary to understanding employee perceptions around unprofessional behavior or the effect that those perceptions have on DFW's workplace culture. Although aggression was the most commonly reported unprofessional behavior experienced by staff, other concerning behaviors raised were perceived gender discrimination, retaliatory behavior, and legal or ethical violations. About 1/4 of interview participants described what they perceived to be gender discrimination, and 20% of survey respondents who experienced aggression said that it was based on gender. 11% of survey participants said they experienced retaliation, and 10% said that they had witnessed legal or ethical violations being committed within the agency. These behaviors were also reported from every program and region. Employee perceptions matter greatly to an organization's culture. DFW employees who experienced such behaviors described a wide variety of negative effects. These included low morale, emotional and physical distress, reduced motivation and productivity at work, feelings of disappointment toward the agency, and embarrassment at working for DFW. Research shows that negative atmosphere can also affect the wider organization, resulting in overall reduced productivity, loss of reputation for the agency, and the inability to recruit or retain good employees. One of the strongest patterns that we discovered from interviews was a mistrust of management and HR to adequately handle reported incidents, which was confirmed by survey results. Only about half of survey respondents agreed that people were held accountable when they behaved inappropriately, and even fewer felt that managers were held accountable. Interview participants expanded on some of the reasons why they felt accountability was a problem in the agency. Many employees said that reported incidents of unprofessional behavior often lacked adequate accountability and resulted in little, if any, follow-through. Several interview participants said they've reported incidents to management or HR and never heard about them again. In some cases, even after they specifically asked for follow-up on the status of their complaint. While the agency is often prohibited from disclosing specific details of a grievance or investigation, these employees said they had not even received general communication about their complaints. These interview participants also said that problem employees involved in an incident were simply transferred to another worksite. Others expressed frustration because they knew of an employee who had exhibited unprofessional behavior, who was eventually promoted to higher levels of management. Past incidents also continued to have a negative effect on current culture for much the same reasons. Staff felt that some of those problem employees and the underlying issues were not properly dealt with, producing a lasting negative effect on the agency's culture. Some of the causes we identified for the negative perceptions around accountability were staff felt that policies and procedures around the reporting process were unclear, a historical inconsistency in evaluating employee conduct, doubt among employees that managers have the people skills or the training to effectively deal with personnel issues. And finally, although recent survey results do indicate that things are improving, longstanding issues occurring within the HR department, such as low morale and high turnover, have also contributed to negative perceptions of accountability within the agency. Research shows that when employees see managers display behaviors such as favoritism or inconsistency, trust is broken. Lost trust harms workplace culture through reduced productivity, disengagement, low morale, greater turnover, and reduced communication, including a willingness to report incidents. More than 50 people in interviews said that because they had not always seen action taken to hold people accountable, they distrusted management. Because these employees do not trust all levels of management to adequately handle unprofessional behavior when it occurs and as it's reported up the management chain, They said they were reluctant to report new issues. Staff who didn't feel comfortable reporting problems said they thought nothing would come of it, or they feared they would be punished if they did file a report. If employees feel they can't report issues, DFW cannot address them, creating a circular problem of mistrust between staff and management. I'd now like to hand it over to Michelle, who will speak to the agency's communication challenges, as well as steps that they're taking to improve the culture.
Thank you, Emily. Our audit found that DFW can prioritize more open, transparent, two-way communication to strengthen trust and cohesion throughout the agency. DFW's complex organizational structure and funding model have created workplace silos that contribute to communication challenges. Although silos themselves are not necessarily problematic, over half of interview participants told us they are concerned about the types of silos they perceive in their workplace. After analyzing all of our data, we determined communication challenges at the agency have hindered employee trust in management and hindered cooperation across programs. One of the topics that repeatedly surfaced in our conversations with employees was how infrequently they interact with higher levels of management. This was largely due to the nature of DFW's organizational structure and the number of remote work sites. These infrequent interactions made some employees less confident that management understood the barriers and challenges they face on the job. Another common concern of employees, how key decisions are communicated. Some employees felt they'd not received clear, timely information about the agency's position on a matter or the rationale behind that position. As a result, some struggled to communicate agency decisions to the public. Some were confused about what to enforce. Others believed agency leaders had ignored their research and expertise when making decisions. For employees so passionate about their work, not having clear, timely information was stressful and demotivating. Many employees were also concerned that program silos reduced their efficiency and effectiveness on the job. Interviewees told us silos had created redundancies and led to missed opportunities for people to collaborate, support one another, and apply for funding in a coordinated way. The agency has taken steps to improve workplace culture, yet more can be done to gain staff confidence and ensure long-term success. The current agency director joined DFW in the summer of 2018, which was only a few months after the high-profile incidents Emily mentioned. Since then, the agency's begun laying some of the groundwork needed to address the issues we've described in this presentation. To address issues of sexual harassment and other misconduct, the agency established an anonymous reporting hotline, started providing bystander training for managers, and formed a diversity advisory committee, which includes a subcommittee on sexual harassment prevention. DFW also instituted core agency values, such as respect, empathy, and accountability, which employees will be assessed on as part of their evaluations. To enhance internal communication, the director's office has implemented regular webinars and news bulletins, which has allowed leadership to speak more directly with employees. The agency told us about several other structural and administrative changes they have made to improve internal communication and reduce silos across programs. However, many of those changes were introduced after we finished conducting interviews. Due to their recent development and lack of performance metrics, we were not able to assess their effectiveness. We asked employees about the changes that were already underway at the time we conducted interviews. Many thought initiatives like the Diversity Advisory Committee and the hotline were positive steps because they raised awareness about important workplace issues. Nevertheless, more than half were skeptical that the initiatives would produce any lasting improvements, citing historical lack of action and unclear consequences for failure to act. They felt past improvement efforts lacked management commitment and measurable results that staff could observe, deepening their skepticism that new efforts would lead to real change. We identified leading practices the agency could adopt to reduce resistance to change and to strengthen the success of their initiatives, as well as to improve communication throughout the agency. They are the foundation of our recommendations. To ensure current and future workplace culture improvement initiatives succeed, we recommend the agency review and update current initiatives to incorporate leading practices such as performance metrics, risk assessments, and a clear communication plan to staff. We also recommend the agency incorporate these leading practices into all future improvement initiatives. To ensure managers and staff consistently address unprofessional behavior, we recommend the agency develop a professional conduct policy which clearly identifies the consequences for unprofessional behavior. We also recommend the agency ensure supervisors receive required personnel training, implement a process for staff to provide feedback on supervisors, and establish clear policies and procedures that outline the investigation process of reports. To help the agency overcome silos and improve communication, we recommend the agency create controls to ensure employees receive and know how to access important information, establish mechanisms to facilitate regular communication up the chain of command, and expand opportunities for employees to interact with those in other programs and regions and in different levels of management. Cultural change takes a long time. Organizations that work on changing workplace culture usually see the strongest gains in 3 to 5 years, making diligent follow-through crucial. DFW employees are passionate about their work, yet they have serious concerns about certain aspects of the agency's culture. They may want things to get better. No, they do want things to get better, but they're skeptical that recent changes have staying power. For real change to take hold and trust to be built, leadership must remain committed to the process it has begun. That concludes our presentation, and we are happy to take questions now or whenever you're ready.
Okay, are there any questions from the members? Oh, there we go. I can't see. Now I can see. No questions. Okay. So would the agency, DFW, would you like to speak to this?
Sure. This is Kelly Suzlin, Director for Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I will take an opportunity to say a few words and also ask Deputy Windrop, who is our lead on the audit, to actually provide some additional information. So thank you, Juan, for taking your time today and allowing us the opportunity to speak as well. Also want to pass on a thank you to the auditor's office they did put a lot of hard work into this. Also, thank you to our staff who also put in a lot of work to this. We've taken it pretty seriously. It's been a long journey, as we heard it right before we started up. We've been going at this for about 2 years. So it's a journey within our longer journey to improvement. And I would point you to a timeline on page 10 of the report that identifies when the actions we were taking before, during, and now relative to the audit. We know full well we have some improvements to make in our culture. As you heard, I started just before the audit began, and it was impressed upon me. That was one of my expectations, was to improve culture at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we're taking it seriously. I don't want to skip over. I was pretty heartened by the fact that sexual harassment is not a pervasive issue at the agency. You heard that that's what started this audit. That was the initiating instances that created this and provided the concern among legislators and our constituents about the sexualized culture. We have clearly adopted a no tolerance approach to sexual harassment. And so I was heartened to hear that it's not a big problem at the agency, but that doesn't mean we don't stay vigilant, and stay on top of it. Those occurrences happened. They're part of our history. They're the low point in our history, frankly. Low point because they occurred, and a low point because there was a broad brush approach of painting the whole agency and all of our employees assuming that they were all involved in that activity. And the vast majority of our employees are professional, have been professional, remain professional. So it's very, again, pleasing to me to see that has been reduced to the point where it's not the significant issue, and we will stick on it and maintain our zero tolerance approach. You also heard, though, that's not the only thing going on at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. The audit identified some other issues I think we're generally aware of. I would say there's some nuance in the data. I want to be very clear that we're taking this report seriously. We're using it as a foundation to chart our path forward. The audit used a purposeful sampling. So it's not a random sampling across the top to identify prevalence. If an issue's there, you'll find it. And then it's backed up, and they use the survey piece to identify the prevalence or the widespreadness, how widespread it is. So I just use caution to look at which group or which survey or which interviews you're looking at when we start quoting percentages. That said, I want to step back and say that we work hard with the auditors. And in the end, I think we have a report that I think reflects the agency I see when I look out. I see an agency that's imperfect, an agency with room to improve, but an agency that's committed to doing that and actively pursuing that. We will achieve a diverse, inclusive, respectful work environment for our professionals to thrive at. We're well on the way. I think what I see in the report is we've got room to go, but the actions we're taking are moving the dials. The communications you talked about or heard about, vastly different than a few years ago and improving all the time. The webinars you heard about, I have friends in other agencies that were excited about their first all-staff webinar to introduce the COVID steps, and we were like on number 6 or 7. We are taking this very seriously. We had a webinar this week with all staff to talk about this report itself. So we're laying it open, we're laying it bare, we're using it as a foundation to move forward. You saw the recommendations in the presentation. Every recommendation that was made is already being acted on, and it's moving forward. I will say one thing. You heard about staff are skeptical. I think that's great, frankly. I hope that they're hopeful and skeptical. We're an agency full of scientists. We're trained to be skeptical. We've made some changes. They should be hopeful that those changes will help, but I want them to remain skeptical so they can hold us accountable so that we can make them work or adjust until they do work. So I would expect no less than that. And I'm actually encouraging staff, stay skeptical, hold us accountable. We will make this a better place to work. And I think we're well along the path to doing that. I think I'm rambling at this point, so I want to turn it over to Deputy Windrow. Excuse me, I say there's a question, and then we'll turn it over to Deputy Windrow.
So Representative Borka.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Director, one of the things that I was concerned about as Auditor Cimber was going through her presentation was retribution, and she did mention it towards the end of her presentation that some people don't report because they're afraid of retribution. What are you doing in your agency to prevent there from being any retribution for somebody reporting, and giving confidence to your employees that if they do report, there will not be retribution, so that if there is a problem, they will be willing to come forward?
Sure. So one, I've told them just that's another no tolerance. We will not tolerate retribution. You can report. You can report to your direct supervisor. If you're not comfortable there, you can report higher. You can report all the way up to the deputy and myself. I've had people take us up on that, and we'll make sure there is no retribution. We're training our supervisors to make sure that they are behaving in that same manner. We've instituted a red flag reporting, and it's an anonymous third-party reporting system where any of our employees can go in and report inappropriate behavior. They stay anonymous, and that's worked through our HR program to evaluate is the validity of the complaint. So we've taken a number of actions to make sure, and as you heard, and I think you all well know, it takes time. So folks are going to have to be able to see that happen a few times and see that we mean what we say, and that we will investigate every incident, and we'll make sure that the appropriate actions are taken and there will be no retaliation or retribution.
Thank you. Representative Gaynor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the the work that was done in these unfortunate situation. But, you know, in listening to that, I mean, there was concern too about nothing was being done. I mean, the kinds of things that were being investigated are certainly it's not new. I mean, these things have been really in the forefront of all public employment for the last at least 10, 15 years or more. I'm concerned, I guess, about a culture that has been cultivated that can you speak a little bit to what kinds of disciplinary actions have been taken to change the behavior?
Yeah, I can. And that's one of the challenges is sometimes these disciplinary actions, all we can say is that action has been taken because it's a confidential action with an individual employee. And I can assure you, we've kind of revamped our entire HR program in the last few years. And we're training our HR staff, investigatory staff, and our supervisory staff to make sure that we are providing progressive discipline appropriately. I have a hunch that, and it's a hunch, no more than that. I want to be careful of not introducing hunches to a data-driven process, that a lot of that will straighten out as people start seeing us take action. It's tough. It's going to take a while. Basically, the proof is in the pudding that we are taking action. I would say I'm highly confident that in the last few years, since I've been in the job and since the deputy's been in the job, we're investigating every complaint and we're making sure and documenting the appropriate action on every complaint, including those through the anonymous red flag reporting opportunity.
Thank you. Representative Burke has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess, and my question is kind of along the same lines. And so listening to the report, the things that stuck out to me, the retribution and the change and the systemic nature of what's going on, but also that circle that we saw. And it was just this real circular process. And so I guess my question hinges around how is that circle going to be broken? Because it feels like there's a lot of talk about changing people and attitudes. And I'm not sure that is, if you can actually do that at this point, or can that circle be broken by actually changing the people versus just trying to change someone's attitude? Because the other piece of it that stood out was that there was a concern about the staying power. And so it feels like there might be more staying power with the individuals that are perpetuating this negative culture versus the staying power of the new rules and regulations and reporting features that we're suggesting in this report.
So to me, the way we break that circle is it's going to be a long process, as you've heard, is to build the trust that it is different this time. I'm not surprised, and I don't hold it against staff for being skeptical again that there's been management changes before, but they didn't stick to it. We are sticking to it thus far. We will continue to stick to it, and I think staff are going to have to see that actually being implemented and being effective to build that trust, because that circle, what breaks that circle or causes that circle, is a lack of trust. I don't know how you build that trust other than just through your actions and day to day and the time it takes to implement these programs. And I think that's what we're doing. I don't think there's a fell swoop opportunity to just improve it. Again, we are taking the recommendations made by the auditor to improve these things. And we're underway on all those. And I think those will break that circle of lack of trust. I don't want to report because I don't think anything will happen. I worry there'll be retribution. When people realize there won't be any retaliation, when they realize there is appropriate action being taken, then they will start doing the reporting that we think they should and want them to do. We've instituted training on that very thing, bystander training. If you see something, you say something. You have not only the opportunity, but an obligation to tell us, and we have an obligation to hold that information in a way that it doesn't cause retaliation to you as an individual.
Thank you. I did have one question. I know that what was the forefront of this study, I guess, or audit, was the sexual harassment. And like we said, like they indicated, it's not number one anymore. But I was surprised in the report that it had the sexual harassment policies hadn't been updated since 2008. So, and a couple of years ago when the Me Too movement was at its height, the legislature went through quite an extensive revamp as well to make sure that we were all covered and understood the ins and outs of all that. So I'm just curious if you've all clearly, I mean, in the suggestions being made, it should encompass that, but have you specifically done more for that particular instance or case?
For this,
Sexual harassment.
Amy's leaning in. I'm
Yeah,
gonna go ahead and
Director,
let her
would you like me
talk.
to take that? Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Thank you, Senator Wilson. So what we found when looking at what happened at the department, and I do want to say that the sexual harassment and sexual violence that occurred at the department is completely, we have no tolerance for it. It is not acceptable. And I want to just extend my heartfelt empathy for the staff that were part of those experiences and for the pain that the agency caused them and the witnesses that were involved. And it's something that the agency is not done healing from at all. What we saw when we looked at those instances is that we not only, it was not a problem of the policy per se, it was really a problem of lack of training and a lack of willingness of bystanders to step forward. So our priority has been on training and on implementing a bystander program and trying to get senior managers and supervisors to be part of see something, say something. We feel like, well, first of all, we appreciate the auditors for their report today, but there are some things that we'd like, some nuances we'd like to add to that conversation. And probably the most important person in the chain of command for an individual staff member is their immediate supervisor, right? Can they talk to their immediate supervisor? And what the auditors found on page 18 of the report is that 85% feel comfortable reporting unethical or inappropriate behavior to the direct supervisor. And 83% are comfortable reporting a safety concern and know that it will be addressed. And so for us, these are the kinds of things that we are starting to see as indicators of positive change. Another indicator of positive change that we see is that 53%, the auditors reported, feel that culture has been improved in their team in the last 12 months, which really is, frankly, given the long-term nature of culture change, having over half the people saying, yeah, things are getting better, is an indicator of improvement. The final piece is relative to making sure that people are comfortable reporting is having a robust HR department. The auditor's report on page 31 and 32 gives us a lot of background in the challenges of our HR department. We had lots of turnover. We had a lack of expertise. We did not have good internal processes. That was probably the highest priority from the director to me, is to rebuild our HR department. And we've reorganized it. We have new leadership there. And in the course of just 1 year under this new leadership, we went from having the lowest employee engagement scores in HR from 38% recommending DFW as a great place to work, 38%, not good, to 67% within the HR department saying it was a great place to work. We went from 38% saying they had teamwork and spirit of cooperation to 92%. So what we see is we're starting to see the turnover in HR coming down. We're starting to see an increase in trust in HR because it's just a better department. And we really are, with the investments in HR and with the investment of the red flag reporting, which I think we are the only agency doing a third-party independent reporting tool, and we do see it as a model. We're just hoping to get in front of these issues which have damaged our department and our staff.
Thank you for that information. Okay. Oh, Senator Orcutt or Representative Orcutt has a question.
Thank you. And this is for Director Suzwind or Ms. Windrop, either one. It was mentioned in the presentation that DFW has some locations where there are 5 or fewer employees. What are you doing to make sure that those offices don't become so isolated that they start operating under their own sets of rules, and it turns into what has in the past been referred to as a good old boys club, and then somebody new comes in and they're harassed because they're not of the like mind. How are you handling that? How are you handling the situation, in those kinds of situations where it's pretty evident to whoever has had a complaint filed against them, it's going to be pretty evident to them who it was because there are so few employees that they work with. How do you provide the protection in those areas that are so isolated from the rest of the DFW employees to prevent this from continuing in those areas?
Director?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Representative Orcutt. So when I look at the risk that the department faces in terms of culture, there are two places, and you highlighted one of them that I think is really where the high risk is. One is these remote locations, often hatcheries, or teams that come in and are temporary or seasonal, and they only really have one connection to the department. I think of those as, those are really the places where people can, like you say, develop an independent culture away from essentially the mothership and really creates a lot of risk for the staff and for the agency. So we've done a couple of things. And what's interesting about this moment is that because of the, there's like what we were doing before COVID and now what we're doing. So there's sort of two parts to this answer. The first part is that before COVID, the FISH program had directed their management to visit on a frequent basis every single hatchery. So managers were going out to every single hatchery, checking in with staff, making sure that they knew what was going on, making sure that they had safety, making sure that the manager themselves was available to be spoken with and to be told what was going on, and so that the manager could see the culture. So that's one thing that was happening before COVID. Now that COVID's happened, and we're still looking at, okay, well, how can we continue to reach out to people? So we've increased the amount of communication going out individually from program directors. So for instance, the FISH program is doing more frequent all staff conversations and trying to really increase the opportunity to have this back and forth. And one of the great things about Teams or Zoom is that staff are able to interact with their management chains in a much more fluid and frequent fashion. And we think that that's a really positive change as well.
Okay. Well, are there any other questions? Okay. Well, then that pretty much is the end of what we were going to be discussing today. I appreciate the work that the auditor's office did. I think that there's a lot of good information here that other agencies can take to heart and look and become a little more proactive in their own agencies. Most agencies don't get the close-up that you guys just got over the course of the last couple of years. So it gives us all a good opportunity to open our eyes and pay attention to what's going on around us. If that's all we have, then I thank you all for coming, and I want to remind everyone that you can still submit any testimony to the JLARC committee through jlarc@ledge.wa.gov. And the next I-900 hearing is scheduled for January 5th, 2022 at 1:30. So I guess we'll see most of you then. Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.